Hello guys, in this video I will show you 5 differences between SQLite and MySQL, and 2 of them are crucially important. And those will be the stories from our own Laravel daily projects. So, for the background, SQLite became really popular in 2024. So look at State of Laravel 2024, a jump from 20% to 32% of developers. The reason? Of course, it's the change in Laravel 11 skeleton, which changed SQLite in .env as default value from the MySQL. And even when you create a new Laravel project with Laravel installer, it will prompt you for the database with SQLite being the default value. It became pretty popular, convenient to use locally, so a lot of developers started doing that. And we did that too, but for 2 specific projects we bumped into interesting issues. So let me show you the things that you need to be cautious about. So the first example and the first difference is about how SQLite and MySQL treat time fields. In our case, we bumped into time issues, but maybe it's the same about date time. So let me demonstrate. We had a filament project grouping some records by time periods like this for lessons to show the classes. And in the migration, we have 2 fields, time, start time and time. And then in the calendar service that groups the data, we do where start time this and that. So we do a lot of manipulation with that field to group the data accordingly. Now we tried both MySQL and SQLite. So this is the mysql.env and it works in MySQL but doesn't work with SQLite, or vice versa. We need some conversion. Let me demonstrate. So here are 2 databases. The first one is MySQL data and those 2 columns here. And the second one is the same in SQLite. Also time data type, but the data, look here, without seconds. So that's why for MySQL we needed to do something like this. Eloquent attribute transforming from carbon this seconds including value and then format to only hours and minutes. And then it works. Then for SQLite, for example, if we change .env to this, the same page of the calendar gives an error, not enough data available to satisfy format, which may be hard to understand in the beginning, but actually just database returns the time without seconds. So in SQLite, we can actually remove those 2 attributes. And now if we refresh the page, it works with correct grouping. And we noticed that pretty accidentally. So what happens in our team now, Laravel Daily is 3 people. So sometimes the guys helping me are creating demo projects, then I'll review them, and then we go back and forth until the final video or project release on GitHub. So sometimes they work with SQLite because it's easier to set up and just go with it. And I work with MySQL most of the times. So this is when I noticed the difference, because to me, while reviewing that code, it didn't work. So yeah, basically, if you are working with time fields in your migrations, keep in mind that MySQL and SQLite save them differently. The second difference that may be pretty crucial is that SQLite doesn't have foreign keys enabled by default. So here's what happened in our project. In one of our project examples, we were working on a big database for e-commerce with like 50 tables, and my colleague Nerius was trying to make the first version, and I was reviewing that, and the migrations didn't work for me on MySQL, but it worked for him with SQLite. Let me demonstrate. So this was his version with SQLite with foreign ID, status ID constrained, although the table name for the foreign key is not statuses, it's order statuses. And by default, constrained without parameter implies that table name from this word pluralized. And when I tried to execute it on MySQL, migrate fresh seed, of course it failed because table statuses didn't exist. However, if I try to launch the same on SQLite, so we change the env to this, and if we rerun those migrations, as you can see, they are successful. So my colleague didn't even notice that foreign key table was incorrect. Why is that? This is actually mentioned in the Laravel docs for foreign keys and migrations. SQLite disables foreign key constraints by default. And if we follow the link how to enable foreign key support in the configuration of database, we see this. So by default, it is false. So if we go to our .env and set that to true, rerun those migrations again, and now SQLite will also flag that the table name is missing with a bit different error message, but still no such table statuses. In other words, if you're using SQLite for local development but then plan to launch the project on MySQL, please always do that with foreign keys enabled to kind of have apples to apples comparison, so SQLite would flag foreign key issues locally too. So those were two kind of crucial differences in my opinion, so date times and foreign keys. Now I will also show you three more that you may not encounter but still good to know. First is case sensitivity. So here's the database table in SQLite and name teacher is uppercase. If we launch that, we have one result, teacher. But if we launch that with lowercase, the result is empty. Now look at the same thing with MySQL. Teacher here, SQL query, we launch that, it is successfully returned. We lowercase that and it's still returned. So by default, with default configuration, MySQL is case insensitive for the values and SQLite is case sensitive. And finally, two more things straight from Laravel documentation with warnings. So for example, in migrations, there's JSON and JSONB, and both cases mention that when using SQLite, a text column will be created. There's no specific JSON column, which means that database doesn't validate the JSON structure, which means it is possible for someone to put in the data in not valid JSON format, and that may have unpredictable consequences. So if you are using SQLite and if you're using SQLite in production, then you need to double check the JSON structure with JSON decode or something like that on PHP level. And the final thing, if you're using Laravel Dusk for testing, not sure how many of you are still using that, actually put that in the comments below if you do. If we search for SQLite here in the docs, as you can see, database migrations, if you use that, you will not be able to execute them on SQLite just because how Dusk works internally. So basically Laravel Dusk does not support SQLite. So yeah, here are the 5 differences that we've encountered or I found in the docs. Is there anything else that you have encountered for your local projects, or if you're using SQLite in production, share your experience in the comments below. And if you want to find out more about databases in Laravel, about structuring databases, I can recommend one of my courses, which is called Structuring Databases in Laravel 11, that includes all the relationships, simple and complex, and a lot of cases inside. So I will link that course in the description below. That's it for this time, and see you guys in other videos.